if you haven't found the book that you connect with, keep reading.
And ask your librarian.
Yes.
Don't even read my books if you don't want to. Read Cinda's. read other people's books. Just read. Reading's good. Well, I'm partial to the Warrior Air series because they're set in Ohio. And for me, I loved, as a librarian and as a reader, but it was great for me to be able to hook readers that I had identified as fantasy readers, but they didn't know that yet about themselves.
Right.
So I was able to give them a book set in Ohio, because I'm from Ohio and they're from Ohio, and I'm like, this is fantasy, but it's set in Ohio. And they're like, oh, and then they'll take it, and I got them.
Yeah, I one thing I enjoy about the Air series is that it's very accessible to non-fantasy fans.
Absolutely is.
I've read a couple of Mindy's books. My favorite would be The Female of the Species because it's so different. It's the characters, even though Mindy says it was hard to get close to, the characters are so well drawn by their action that they were very believable on the page.
The very first draft of The Female of the Species is horrible. I wrote it 15 years before that book was published. Mm-hmm. And I reread it. I sold it on concept, which means that I said I had to write a synopsis and a pitch, but I said, I have this idea, and I sold it. I was like, oh, that's great, right, because it's already written. I wrote it 15 years ago. Oh, wow. I opened it up, and I started reading this book that I had banged out as like a sophomore in college. And it was so bad. I mean, heinous bad. And I actually started tweeting lines from it with the hashtag bad first novel.
Oh.
Because it was so terrible. And that's fine, because it bears absolutely no resemblance whatsoever, and I mean none, to the book that is on the shelves today. And so the worst thing I have ever written was actually the first novel I ever wrote. And I think that's probably true of a lot of people.
Yeah. The worst thing I've ever written, I really don't know how to answer that. I wrote my first novels in junior high. And I guess I tend to grade on the curve because I'm far enough removed from them that I'm pleased that I can hear my voice in there, even though it's definitely not the way I would write it today. And what that means is that I've progressed, I guess. So I hate to refer to them as the worst thing I've ever written. I did write a lot of maudlin poetry in junior high and high school. So, and I still have some of that around.
Follow-up question, do you remember any of this poetry? Like a single line would satiate me?
It's not spring, not summer. The calendar says March.
Thank you so
That's
much.
great.
Thank you so much.
That's great. Yeah.
Maybe it's because I had such a long latent period when it comes to getting published. I like to think that every book I've read, every person I've met, every experience I've had, every lesson I've taken contributes to the writer that I am now. Nothing is wasted.
You're climbing a ladder and it keeps extending. So we were talking before when we started this thing, I have won awards, I'm not a bestseller. Cinda is a New York Times bestseller, hasn't won a major award. So that's one of those things. I would love to be a New York Times bestselling author. Cinda would love a major award. Someone always has something that you want. So success is measured by I don't know what.
Well, and there's always another hill to climb.
Yep.
I mean, I can remember that I thought all my troubles would be over if I found an agent.
Yeah.
And then all of my troubles would be over if I found a publisher for my book. And there's always more things to aspire to. Yep. But the other thing I think it's important to keep in mind is when you measure success, is this a story that connects with readers? Did the story do what I wanted it to do? Is this the best story I could have written at this particular time? Because otherwise you can look back at books you wrote in the past and go, oh, could have done better, you know.
Well, one of the readers that came through today said to Cinda that her sister had never been a reader, and she gave her Cinda's books and turned her into a reader. And that's the biggest compliment you can ever receive. And my first book, Not a Drop to Drink, a lot of teachers have told me that they use it for reluctant readers, specifically boys. And that is a huge compliment. And so, yes, that's success.
Ever bristle at the distinction YA?
I don't bristle at the distinction. I bristle at the belief that it is less than adult. Because that definitely happens. People all the time ask me, when are you going to write a real book? Or when are you going to write a book for adults? I'm like, well, 80% of my readers are adults, so you tell me when.
Yeah, I don't know if I've been dissed more often for writing fantasy or writing YA.
That's true.
It's, to me, my books are all about story and connection with the reader. And I feel really blessed that readers have taken my characters into their hearts. And if that's not a real book, I'm ready to live with that.
That's true. Fiction, the job of a writer is to make people care about things that never happen to people that don't exist. It doesn't matter what your audience is. If you have a reader, then you're doing something right.
Right.